good to be back talking about Boss XC again, because it's been a bit slow going. As you know, my offsider's not here as much as he was, and I've been away to Motorex, and I'm trying to get myself organised now to get back and get some work done on this car, because we need to get it progressing. We've had a bit of a lull, and now we've got a plan together so we can move forward. And what I want to talk to you about today is just body lines. I'm getting ready to do filler. So everything you see here now is metal only with the epoxy primer on it. And what I'm doing now is just working out my body line. So you can see the nice distinct lines. So we've got new old stock quarters, and this door skin was a new old stock as well. So I know the lines on these are as they're meant to be from Ford. And what I've gone and done now is just gone along with the pencil and found the centre of that body line. And it's interesting that through this quarter, if you run a straight edge through there and go from point to point, in the middle there's about a 3mm difference in the height. And this is a bit of my old Tassie oak that I like to use, so just Tasmanian oak timber, pretty much my version of a spline. And when I put that on there, I can twist that up to get myself up to there and put the right amount of curve and run my line through, so I know if I'm going to block to it, because I'll tape that and then block up and down to the tape, and you'll see that as we do that later. But what I'm doing now is I'm working out exactly where I want the line. So I'm going to do some reference points. So I'll do a point from here to here, and then take my trusty steel ruler and measure from that point down to the body line, and then through the centre here. So I've got my mount there that I can pick a centre line there, and I'll measure from this wheel arch to that point, and I'll write these down so that when it comes time, when I fill this with either high fill or even, I'll actually probably bog white these anyhow, just because I like to do it that way. And then the same, the middle of the door handle to here, I've marked at 31mm. And it's interesting, like I say, these have had no damage, they're all original panels. The centre of this one to there is different to this one. So it's all going to be about getting the body line as Ford planned it and designed it, and have references that I can come back, because once you start putting a lot of product on there, you're going to lose your lines. So I want to try and make sure. I've seen way too many cars where they'll put their tape on there and make that dead straight, and the car loses its shape because the designer put a curve in that for a reason, and that's to make it balance with the rest of it. So I'm going to make sure that I put those back. So the other thing with the side of the car is that, you know, we all talk about having big long blocks and the right block to get the right shape. I think it's important to take on board as well just how much curvature there is in this body. So through that panel alone there's about 15mm variance, and the trick is to get something that's going to give you that nice transition and flat panel. And then when you come through here with a Ford, this particular door skin is pretty much straight, but the car itself is not straight. So when we go from front to back, I've got probably 15mm there. So it's lined up here, it's lined up with the sill, it's lined up there, so clearly it's got to have that shape in it. So the next stage when I do my bodywork now is that I want to have that nice transition, but at the same time I want the end of my doors to have like a 3mm end on them. So too often what I see is people straighten the car up and you look down the end of the doors and they've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7mm bog on the face of the door. So hopefully when I'm done, when I get this edge here, I'm going to look down that and I'm just going to have what should be the equivalent of 3 pieces of 1mm. And when it's closed up, it's going to look nice. It's going to have that Coke bottle shape, and I'm going to have nice gaps, and the ends of my panels aren't going to be nice and thick and chunky. So the other body line that I think is really important on a Falcon is this one. So this reverse curve tends to get lost a bit in the filling process, you know, especially if you're using high build primers or spray poly, and this curvature here. So where that comes around, if this is kept the way the factory planned it, with the nice radiuses and the right amount of curvature, it gives the car a nicer shape. So I've just marked here to make sure that these are correct, each one. And then something different we've done on this car is we've actually welded the skin to the frame, because on some of the others I've done, trying to get the paint to go in there and look nice is really difficult. So we've welded it, and then I've sanded it all down and put my little ridge in there, so it's going to look like it's original, but it won't have that gap down in there. So just one of those things. And then this pillar, we're looking to maintain our gaps, you know, all the same. We've actually welded the edge of that. So this is all steel at the moment, and we've welded that edge to get all of this to look balanced and the same. And then at the top of the door, we've actually cut a piece out of there and welded it back up to put a shadow line in, so that all of this looks really clean and tidy and sharp. Not how Ford had it, but I think how probably the designer would have liked to have seen it. So the other thing I like to do, as I'm getting prepping up to do this filler work done, is I like to put door locks, catches, so the actual catches that we're going to use, because what I don't want to do later is find that I'll run out of adjustment because the latch is different. So in this case I'm using an aftermarket stainless steel striker with the factory lock. So I want to be able to make sure it all closes up. And then I've also got all the original rubbers. So these are all Rare Spares rubbers, and I've got those on with the pinch weld and all, just to make sure that that all closes up. And when I'm actually doing the filler work, I'm going to leave those on. So I'll mask them up so I don't go and mess them up. But I need to make sure that once I've done my body work and I paint it, I don't want to then put the rubbers and the locks in, try and shut the door, and it doesn't close. Now the reason I'm doing that is that I've done it previously where I haven't done that, and I go to close it and the rubbers are either thicker than factory or there's an issue. So I want to know the problems before I do the paint rather than after. So door gaps, we've talked about door gaps a lot in the last probably 5 years. Prior to that, I mean, I used to try and do what I can, and we used to use all sorts of bits and pieces to be able to try and get our gaps nice and even. And I've got a few bits and pieces in my hand here at the moment. So I used to make something like that, which is a bit of 6mm bar with a taper on it, and that way I can put it in there and check the consistency of the gap, and you can put a little line on it like that. I've even had them before where I've done that with a hacksaw and put a mark in it so that I can put it in and check the width of how wide the gap is. And then I went to a plastic one like that. So these ones are like a window spacer, and I'll show you, you can buy them in a box, and I use those a lot of times if I'm spacing panels and all different bits and pieces. So you can sand those down fairly easily. And then what I'm using nowadays is a digital micrometer where I can actually check the gap of what I've got, and I'm looking to try and achieve around the 5.5mm. So I've now gone to these. It gets a little bit too accurate sometimes, but I find these now are quicker than using a spacer. So they say you never stop learning. So I've gone down to Motorex the other day, taken the ute down, and I took a bucket and sponge with the plan to actually give it a wash at the motel. Couldn't find a tap, running out of time. I thought, look, I'll Google search, find a brushless car wash. So I found one of those, gone through, run it through, and the process was that, you know, they rinsed the car and then put all the soap on it and then high pressure hosed it off. And when I've gone to wipe it down, check this out. So clearly whatever their soap was either very acidic or very alkaline, and I'd say alkaline. And you can see where it's landed on the top and just run down. It's just ripped the shine clean off. So you imagine if you had a set of billet wheels or something and put it through. But fortunately, it's going to come off nice and easy because I've got the old mother's metal polish, and I've had a bit of a practice on the other side. So you can get it off by hand with a little bit of effort, like that. You can see there that's coming up pretty good. But on the underside, where it's probably a little bit coarser, I've actually grabbed the Mirka polisher. So these are battery operated. Just for the lambs wool initially, and then I'll go back over it with a foam pad, I would think, to get rid of those lambs wool marks. that's the lazy way if you've got the machinery, but if you've got a good product, it makes life very easy. So you've probably noticed all the way through the shooting in the last few months, these front guards have been in bare metal, and the reason for that is originally I cut these up through here and down and moved the wheel arch. So they've had a lot of welding, and then we took the blinker out of here as well, welded that up, and then the nose cones have been welded on. So they've had a huge amount done to them, and they're now finally in the fixed position. We've got the mounts down here sorted, it's got all the bracketry on it, and what I'm working on now while it's in that fixed position is to make sure I've got the shape right. So I'm using my timber again to get my lines, and I'll just show you some close-ups of what I'm working with. So I'm using a bit of heat with the heat shrinks and dollies, spoons to get in from the back to actually push it all into shape to make sure that I can get it to within that 1 mil or so I can get it primed up or get the epoxy on it and get some filler in it. So because I've welded this, you know, pretty much full length, what I want to do now is make sure I've got my shape right. So, you know, using that flexible Tasmanian oak again, you can see there I'm looking to get a nice consistent curve, and they, from the factory, they are a bit flat through here, but I'm looking that I don't have any highs and lows. And you can see the shiny spots here, so I'm just rubbing a flat file over that, and that gives me the highs and the lows. And then with a leather bag, I can put the leather bag on, tap it from the back, file it again, and reduce those back to virtually nothing. And that means, you can see there, if you bring the camera over and look down from the top, you're talking about, you know, you'd fill that with high build primer probably, but I'm just trying to chase that out now to maximise or minimise the amount of filler. And as you can see here, as I get down, I've got a little bit more work to do there. So I've been pulling that up, you know, a bit of heat and a bit of dollying, and my plan is to get that nice and smooth. I can get that primed up and we can get this car finished. So another little job we've been working on is these pillar covers. So this trim just never seems to stop, but we're going to run that factory style hood lining like the XC one. So this moulding here is the original one, and then this is the original cover that makes all that look nice and finished. So we thought about not having that because, like on the XA, that was just covered, but then we've got to get the transition right from the dash to the pillar. And on the FG, it comes down and curves in. So we're sort of doing a bit of both. So we're going to take this is fiberglass, and I've got some still shots there that Louise can lay over for us. And what we're going to do now is we've put that on. We've done that in situ so that while it's there, we can make sure it's going to fit. And what we'll do now is trim this back a bit smaller and then get a nice transition out so it looks like a factory pillar that moulds into the dash and looks finished. So I want to get that finalised so we can get it to Simon and put it with all the other bits that make up the trim for this car. So we seem to have a whole lot of small things going on, and it's not making it look like we're going very far, but this bumper bar, you've seen it on quite a few of the programs, it's been chopped up and changed, so it's now been all sanded up, ready to go to get some epoxy on it, and we can get some filler into that. So there's been a lot of work to get this to where it's at, and it's now at a point where this had black epoxy on it, so I've sanded all that out, straightened all these edges up, make sure all our radiuses are nice, and then that'll now go into epoxy. get some filler on that, same as we did with the rear one. And then all the brackets now are finished, so they've all been pulled apart, and I've now got some epoxy and some primer on those, and I might give you a quick look at those in a minute. And then at the same time, the grill has been done, and you've seen that in the other programs. So we're in the process now of sanding down. We just did a little bit of straightening up on these with the heat gun, and now I'll get these epoxied again. We'll get some light plastic filler in those where we need it, so I can get all of these bits to start to get them ready so they can be painted. So to be able to sand this, so just talking about sanding the face of it, we just use like a 240 in a soft back paper, and it's surprising you can actually sand the plastic and use that almost like a primer. So I'm going to try and get this as close as I can, and that'll enable me to get good adhesion. So once I've sanded all that back and got it nice and even, I'll then use a PPG, make an aerosol plastic adhesive promoter that I'll spray that with, and then I'll probably use the black epoxy on it. But these papers are really good, so that's it there in the Mirka, and you'll find those on our website now on astldesign.com. So there's a whole range of papers and consumables from Mirka. So we'll keep at that, and we'll bring it back to you when it's painted. So following on from all those bits and pieces, so when the grills come out and we pulled all the brackets and all off it, it's all been stripped down, put the epoxy on them and the Vibrance High Build primer. So we'll rub all those out now. They'll all end up black, and I'll use the black base coat with a semi-gloss clear. But first of all, I need to get all the edges tidied up. Some of these have got a bit of rust pitting and stuff in them, so we'll see whether the High Build gets it out. Otherwise we might just use a bit of fine filler. And we'll get all those ready, and my plan is to have all this happening. There's no good painting the car and then have 3 months worth of work to do. So I can have Steve and Darren do a bit on these while I'm trying to progress other things, and we'll get it all processed so that I can get it all painted, so when we go to assemble the car, we've actually got all these bits ready to go. So part of that plan to organise it, so a lot of the trim's gone off to Simon now, so these plastic parts here is a pretty good chance they're going to stay as they are in the black plastic. So these obviously go around the seat. So we've been cleaning those up with this naturally black heavy duty cleaner, and I actually find this really good. I mean, I used to use this one, and we've probably been using a bit of that today as well. So I've had Steve on this. So the idea is to get all these bits cleaned up, make sure we've got everything we need, so when we go to assemble the car, we don't find something's got a broken clip or there's a problem with it. So I'm getting all those bits that I think won't be trimmed, because I'm trying to keep a little bit of that factory feel with the car. I don't want like an auto salon trim. I don't want everything covered in leather and it doesn't feel right. I really want the inside of this car to feel like something Ford would have built that's a prototype or a concept car that would have come out of the factory. So I'll be maintaining some of those plastics to give it that factory feel.